Hi everybody, welcome to Bedtime Stories on Facebook Live. My name is Geoff Orr and I'm the Mayor of North Saanich. I want to start by thanking Councillor Charlene Thornton-Joe for kicking this process off. It's been a little bit of fun getting ready, and also well done to Carol, David and Susan for the other days of this week. So my story tonight is Wombat Stew. And before I start the story, I'll tell you a little bit about why I chose Wombat Stew, which is a book about Australia. So if we look at the globe here, just to sort of see where we were at the time as a family in 2000 in Calgary, which is just a little bit east of Victoria, which is where we live now. And if we go all the way across the Pacific Ocean, across the international date line, we end up in Australia about 14 or 15 hours later. And while we were there, we lived over here on the west in Perth, Australia. And here's a little bit of a closer picture of Australia. And you can see on here, this is where Perth is, right down to the south, and Fremantle. And we've got some local animals, a kangaroo and a koala, and Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane are over on this side. I also want to take a minute here to mention that through the wonders of Facebook Live, Don Merritt, a colleague and a friend who lives down there now, reached out, and also want to say to all the folks down there that are celebrating Anzac Day that we wish you a good day today. I know it's an important day for everyone. So to add a little bit more fun, my daughter Samantha is doing the videoing tonight, and I thought I'd show you a picture of Samantha when she was 3 in 2000 when we lived and moved to Australia, and then roll the clock forward 20 years later, and here she is on election night in November of 2018. So let's get on to the story. I did mention there might be some learning here, so I've got a few little bits of information that you might find of interest. So there are 3 times as many sheep living in Australia than people. Wombat poo, the purpose of the story, Wombat Stew, is shaped like a cube. 2 native Australian animals, the platypus and echidna, are the only 2 mammals in the world that lay eggs to give birth. Koalas sleep for about 20 hours a day. The kangaroo and the emu, and this one's kind of funny, were chosen to be the 2 animals on the Australian coat of arms because they can't walk backwards, reflecting a forward-thinking culture. The record jump recorded by a kangaroo is a whopping 9 meters. 17 of the world's most poisonous snakes can be found in Australia. So if you don't like snakes, you might want to think twice about going there. So here's our book for this evening, Wombat Stew, written by Marcia, Vaughan and illustrated by Pamela Lofts. So we start off with one day on the banks of a billabong, which is like a pond, a very clever dingo caught a wombat. And have a look at the 2 eyes here. You'll see this little character coming out as the story goes. And he decided to make wombat stew, gooey, brewy, yummy, chewy, wombat stew. So there's the 2 eyes of the kookaburra that's come out of his hole. Platypus came ambling up a bank. "Good day, Dingo," he said, snapping his bill. "What is all that water for?" "I'm brewing up a gooey, chewy stew with that big wombat," replied Dingo with a toothy grin. "If you ask me," said Platypus, "the best thing for a gooey stew is mud. Big blobs of billabong mud." "Blobs of mud," Dingo laughed. "What a good idea. Righto, in they go." So Platypus scooped up big blobs of mud with his tail and tipped them into the billy can, which is like a pot. Around the bubbling billy, Dingo danced and sang. I'm going to turn the volume down. Wombat stew, gooey brewy, yummy chewy, wombat stew. Kookaburra's not so happy there. Waltzing out from the shade of the iron banks came Emu. She arched her graceful neck over the brew. Oh, oh, Dingo, she fluttered. What have we here? Gooey, chewy wombat stew, boasted Dingo. If only it were a bit more chewy, she sighed. But don't worry, a few feathers will set it right. Feathers? Dingo smiled. That would be chewy. Righto, in they go. So into the gooey brew, Emu dropped her finest feathers. Around and around the bubbling billy, Dingo danced and sang. Wombat stew, crunchy munchy for my lunchy, wombat stew. Old blue-tongued lizard came sliding off his sun-soaked stone. Silly Dingo, he hissed. There are no flies in this stew. Can't be wombat stew without crunchy flies in it. And he stuck out his bright blue tongue. There's a lot to be said for flies, agreed Dingo, rubbing his paws together. Righto, in they go. So Lizard snapped 100 flies from the air with his long tongue and flipped them into the gooey, chewy stew. Around and around and around the bubbling billy, Dingo danced and sang. Wombat stew, crunchy munchy for my lunchy, wombat stew. Up through the red dust popped Echidna. Wait a bit, not so fast, he bristled, shaking the red dust from his quills. Now I've been listening to all this advice, and take it from me, for a munchy stew, you need slugs and bugs and creepy crawlies. Dingo doesn't look too sure. Dingo wagged his tail. Why, I should have thought of that. Righto, in they go. So Echidna dug up all sorts of creepy crawlies and dropped them into the gooey, chewy, crunchy stew. The very clever Dingo stirred and stirred, all the while singing, wombat stew, hot and spicy, oh so dicey, wombat stew. Just then the sleepy-eyed koala climbed down from the gum tree. Look here, he yawned. Any bush cook knows you can't make a spicy stew without gum nuts. Leave it to a koala to think of gum nuts, Dingo laughed and licked his whiskers. Righto, in they go, and into the gooey, chewy, crunchy, munchy stew, Koala shook lots and lots of gum nuts. Aha, cried Dingo, now my stew is missing only one thing. What's that? The animals asked. That big wombat, there he is. Wait, stop, hang on, Dingo. You can't put that wombat into the stew yet. Why not? You haven't tasted it. Righto, I'll taste it. And that very clever Dingo bent over the billy and took a great big slurp of stew. Ah, phooey! I'm poisoned, he howled. You have all tricked me. And he dashed away deep into the bush, never again to sing, wombat stew, gooey, brewy, yummy, chewy, wombat stew. And that brings us to the end of our story, Wombat Stew. Thank you all for joining in, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.